All right. Well, yeah, here we go, I guess. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. This is Code and Coffee. You're gonna notice I might be a little bit discombobulated this morning. I don't know. It's been a little bit of a morning. I'm hoping that tech will work a little bit better for me on stream than it has for, I don't know, like everything else that I tried. Like I tried to do a couple of things with the stream setup here, and that didn't go quite according to plan. My work computer decided it was going to put up a little bit of a fight. It's been a morning, but that's not what you came here to talk about. You didn't come here to listen to me whine and complain about technology. Although I'll probably still do that anyway during stream. You came here to talk about React, and that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to say hi to chat in just a moment here. But for anybody that's new, this is Code and Coffee. This is the show where I continue building on some form of a project. Now you can notice the GitHub repository in just a minute here when I get over to the main screen that we've been building on. Actually, I'll go ahead and throw it into chat real quick and do that. So you can see that there. And we're going to continue building a React app using TypeScript. If you're not familiar with React, if you're not familiar with TypeScript, that's okay. That part of the goal here is to kind of learn by watching and also to watch somebody play around and learn on their own. That I openly admit I am not a React expert. I've been doing web development for a fair amount of time, but I'm not a React expert. So part of this is also just to learn together, to show how a real developer, or at the very least me, gets in and does things when they're not super familiar with a particular technology. So that's really it. That's the whole goal here. That's what we're here to do. And please, 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 as we go through this, ask questions. That one of the things I always like to say is that this really works best when everybody is saying hi and contributing and so forth. So with that, let me go ahead and say hi to chat this morning. So good morning to Mama Dear. Good morning, Todd. Good to see you back. Good morning to Eric. Good to see you back. And to Luis and to Leon, to Bernie, to Mohammed. Glad to see that everything looks good so far. I'll hide the little bit of disasters that I've had otherwise. Good morning to Yuma. It's been a little while since or Lama. Sorry, it's been a little while since I've seen you here. It's good to see you back. Good morning to Simona. Good morning to Adam. Yeah, fantastic. It's great to see everybody. And again, say hi, introduce yourself, ask questions. Like that's really what this is. That's really what this is all about. So let's go ahead and take a look then at what we've got going on and kind of start to chat through everything. So good morning from San Diego. Good morning to Sashi. My home for 15 years. I lived over in North Park. Love San Diego. Definitely want to move back there at some point. Probably retirement. But anyway, yeah. So and good morning to Andre. Good to see you. So let's talk a little bit about the application that we're building, the state of everything, and so forth. Hey to Manav. There's the GitHub repository. So what we're doing here is we are working on building out a React application. Now, the React application is slowly being built over the last couple of weeks. And what this eventually is going to become is some form of a recipe manager. Now, its exact final form, I'm honestly not 100% certain yet, because again, we're literally building this thing as we go. And we're also really using this as an opportunity to explore React. So the exact tasks that this will be able to perform is really secondary to just getting in and exploring the technology and poking around on it and so forth and so on. So right now, the functionality of the app, I think this is always a good place to start. So run start. We'll let that load up here. Chugga, is it displays out my recipe manager. It right now just has a name of stateful mashed potatoes because we had like just introduced state, which we'll come back to and talk about in just a couple of moments. There's our description. There are potatoes that are mashed, and then there is the 3 steps to go ahead and create our mashed potatoes. So that is the current state of the application. Now, if you're not familiar with React, React uses this cool little thing called JSX, which allows us to incorporate JavaScript code, which is what you're seeing here. And it allows us to incorporate HTML, which is this part here. And then what you'll also notice is that we have the ability to even create our own custom tags, which is what you're seeing right here. So this is actually a component, or effectively a custom tag, that is now going to display out a recipe. You're also going to notice that we can add in properties, or props as they're known in React, that allows us to send information into our recipe. So we can send in our recipe props here, and that's going to be the collection of our title, our description, and our steps. And then what you're also going to notice if I sneak back over here is that we pass in a copy of the recipe there to then display out. So that's where we sort of left everything, is we created this component and then we went in and added in some properties, and then we had just started talking about state. So cool. So Adam says that it's a first time here and just happened to plan on working on a personal React TypeScript project, which is a price negotiator. So fantastic. Great. Hopefully this will help you out. Okay. So what we want to do now is we want to introduce state. And you can see the list of goals like right below me that list out everything that we want to do. And primary is add state. So let's talk a little bit about state here. So let me come over here. All right. So let's talk a little bit about state and a little bit about state in React. So React, and we've talked about this a couple of times before, has a little bit of a reputation for potentially being complex because there's a lot of things that it does, there's a lot of things that it requires, and because of the fact that it has a lot of very strong opinions. And opinions aren't necessarily bad, and I'm in no way, shape, or form bashing React. I always like to be clear about that I'm not in any way, shape, or form bashing React, but it does have that reputation for being a little bit complex to get into, and that's a big part of the reason why, because it does an awful lot, and it does have a lot of opinions. One of the biggest opinions that it has is how it wants to work with state. So let's define state. State is the collection of data, the collection of information that is going to determine what's going on inside of your application and determine what it is that we're going to share out to your users. And so when you think about like state at a high level, this could be storing something like we're in an edit state, so somebody's allowed to modify some data. We're in a view state where somebody is just viewing some data. We're in a create state where somebody is creating something brand new. And so state could absolutely be storing that type of information about the action that the user is performing. And so when we think about something like that, obviously that state is going to change, and then we need to make sure that our application is going to update in response to that. So if somebody goes into an edit mode, then we need to make sure that we go to the proper edit screen. If somebody goes into an update mode, then we need to make sure that we're displaying the proper update screen. So all of that 100% is part of state. But the other part of state is any data that my application needs to be able to work with. Because when we're talking about all of these different front-end frameworks, be it Vue or Svelte or Angular or React, or even some of the older school ones like Knockout, they all do very much the same basic thing, is that they're all designed to go, hey, you've got some level of data, let's go ahead and make it easy to bind this out to the screen and to display it, and more importantly, to be able to automatically update it should those values change. So if you modify a value over here and I'm displaying it in a view state over on another portion of the page, whatever it is that you modify here will then automatically be updated over here. And so all of our different front-end frameworks are able to do that, be it, again, Vue, Svelte, Knockout, whatever it is that you're using, and certainly React. So state is a very common thing throughout all of these different front-end frameworks. Now, in React, state has a very particular rule, and that is that state is immutable. IMMUTABLE, immutable. And immutable means that you are not allowed to make it be quiet. See, because it's immute. See, mute being quiet, able, immutable. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Joke for my own entertainment. Anyway, so state is immutable. And immutable is a very fancy word for saying that it's not allowed to change. And you might be thinking at this point, well, wait a minute, Christopher. You just said that one of the big goals here of having state is to make sure that our application is always going to be updated as those values change. And if our values don't change, then what are we doing here? What is state all about? So when I say that state is not, thank you, Drew. Yeah, it is a tough audience here. So when I say that state is immutable, when I say that state is not allowed to change in React terms, what I'm really saying is that what you need to do is you need to replace whatever the original value was with whatever it is that you want it to be now. That's really what it is that we need to do here. So if my original value is 42, I'm not able to just update that directly. That what I need to do is I need to take a new value and put it into its place. And I'll talk about why in just a second. I do want to highlight, yeah, Mama Dear says that it's too early for bad jokes. Yeah, that's fair. It probably is. See, just little coffee here. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take whatever our new value needs to be, and we're going to replace it on top of the old one. And the reason that React does it this way is because what React wants to be able to do is it needs to be able to determine what changed. So Sashi asks, state creates a copy. Exactly. That's exactly what we're going to wind up doing is we're going to create a copy and then put it into the, or replace whatever it was that was there. And what this then allows React to do is it allows React to go, okay, I have this original object with all of these original property values. And now you're going to give me a brand new object with whatever updated values it is that you might happen to have. And so what we want to then do is look for the differences. Because one of the big things that React wants to avoid is updating things on the screen that don't necessarily need to be updated. So if I'm able to look at the original object and look at whatever the new object is going to be, and I can do a diff there, I can compare the differences, I can now better go, oh, okay, this is what changed, this is what changed, this is what changed. Let me just go in and update the display for just those 3 items. So it does become a better bit of performance for doing it that way. So that's why it enforces that rule, is to help with performance. Now, it's also worth highlighting, if we go one step further here, that not allowing somebody to modify state by making state immutable, it does also eliminate an entire class of bugs. So let's say that we have an object, and on that object, I might be storing a couple of properties that are related to one another. So let's say, for example, that maybe I've got a quantity and I've got a price, and then in turn, I've got whatever a total is here. And so those are the different things that I'm going to be modifying here. So I've got a quantity, I've got a price, and then I've got my total over here. Let's say that we're now going to start updating those values. And let's say in particular that we're going to allow the user to now update those values. So in other words, those values are not necessarily going to be updated instantaneously. That one of those values, maybe like quantity, is going to be updated first, and then maybe our price is going to be updated second. And then again, that total is going to be calculated based on that. Well, depending on what it is that my user is doing, they might not be complete yet. They might not be done doing all of their editing. And so as a result, our all up state might be in some sort of an invalid situation, that maybe the price is driven by the quantity. So that maybe we've got a situation where if we have 10 or more items that we're going to allow for a particular price or something like that. So now if I go in and I say 6, or I change from like 6 to 10, maybe now our price is now in an invalid state. And that can be a problem. So by making our state immutable, by not allowing our state to just change right there on the fly, then what happens is we get the ability to always make sure that our state is always in a valid, state. It's always in a valid situation, because what will then have to happen is our user will then have to go in, set everything, and then they hit that little save button. And now we go, oh, okay, now it's safe to look at this. You can almost think of this much in the same way that you might if you were doing a database update. That one of the things that's very common when you're doing a database update that maybe has to update across a couple of tables is we lock all of the data, that we make sure that nobody is going to be able to use this data, nobody's going to be able to look at it until we go in, we make all of our changes, and then we go, okay, now it's safe to look. And that's basically what we're doing here, is that we're saying, hey, we're going to go in, we're going to make some changes. Don't look at what we're doing. We'll let you know when we're done. And the way that we let you know that we're done is then we go in and we replace whatever the existing state object was. So by making our state immutable, it does help avoid a full class of bugs there. Now, the challenge then becomes it's a little bit then counterintuitive to the developer. At the very least, it requires a couple of additional steps that you might not necessarily expect. So what we left off with last week is we've got our little mashed potatoes recipe right up here. And eventually we'll offload this to an API, but but there it is for right now. So there's our initial state value. And so what you're going to notice is we're going to now register this as a state object. And the way that we register this as a state object in React is we use this little hook here called UseState. And let me bring this up here real quick. I want UseState. There we go. Yeah, hooks. So hooks are relatively new to React. They came out with like React 18.6, something like that. And what hooks will do is they will give you a set of relatively generic events. It will give me the opportunity to keep an eye out for different things changing, or it will give me a hook into the inner workings of React so that I can make appropriate changes. And so if we think about something like UseState, that's a perfect example of this. Because what UseState is going to do is it's going to give me that hook into React. It's going to give me the opportunity to make a change inside of, it's going to give me an opportunity to make a change inside of React. Now, what UseState will do is it will give me, first of all, a reference to whatever that stateful object is. And so that's what I'm going to do from now on. And then it will also give me this function here that in this case is called setState. We can call it whatever it is that we want. We called ours setRecipe. That will now give me the opportunity to then update state. So the TLDR, the too long didn't read on all of this, is when I want to make an object stateful inside of React, that I want to allow it to change, that I want to make sure that React is going to respond to any changes to it, I use UseState. So this is the way that I register it. This now becomes that stateful object, and so you'll notice that I'm now using that right here. And then when it comes time to make modifications, the way that I'm going to do that is by using this little setRecipe here. So that's going to allow me to modify it. This is going to give me access to that current state. So right here, all that I'm doing is I'm setting whatever my initial value is. So right there, I'm setting whatever I want my initial value to be. And that was whatever our constant was up above. Obviously, we could pull that in from an external store, which again, I hope to try and get to today. We'll see how things flow. So that's state, and that's how state works inside of React. And I'm going to go in and start using this here in just a couple of moments. So yeah, okay. Let's see. Just going to move that just a little bit. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. Let's see. One of those people who shifted their workbench to the right and enjoying the new look. Yeah, so Sashi highlights this part right here, the workbench over to the right. I've talked about this a few times in the past, and honestly, if you ask me, this is the only way to have your workbench set up inside of VS Code, and here's why. So here's all of my code, and it's sitting right here. Workbench is over here on the right, and you'll notice that as I open and close that, my code does not move. But if that's over on the right side, I'm just going to do this real quick here. Workbench. Can never remember. Sidebar, there it is, left. Yeah, so let me move that over to the left. And now what you're gonna notice is when I turn this on and off, now my code moves. So yeah, and it's funny because you might be thinking, well, what difference does that make? Well, the difference that it makes is that now everything on your screen shifts. And so that now causes an additional little bit of churn in your brain, because now your eyes have to focus, your brain has to adjust. Oh, okay, everything has now moved over, that it is a little bit jarring. And I know that it doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot, but it does make a difference. Like all of those little things do make a difference. And after a while, you know, those little things do start to tire you out. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of having that over on the right-hand side. It's the only way to go. And anybody who's also heard me talk about those types of things knows that I'm a big fan of ligatures as well, and in particular with Fira code. So yeah, and you can check out Fira code as well. You can also see I need to update my credit card on GitHub, but that's a conversation for a different time. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, Workbench on the right. It makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference. And again, you know, I know that it doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot, but it is. Mohammed says, thanks for pointing the sidebar out. Always wanted to do that, didn't know how. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like having the driver's seat on the right used to be to the left sidebar. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I've only ever had to drive on while sitting on the right side of the car for like about 2 weeks out in Scotland. It took me about a day and a half to try and get used to that, and after a while I did. The biggest challenge was roundabouts, because you have to look then obviously a different way on a roundabout. That if you're on the right hand side of the car, now your roundabout is going to go to the left, so you have to now look to the right. And even though we don't have a whole lot of roundabouts here in the US, you obviously then look the other direction. So that was probably the hardest part for me to remember, was which direction to look on roundabouts, which of course, if you're anywhere in the UK, Scotland, and all of that, roundabouts are all over the place. So that was the hardest part for me to adjust there. So yeah. Yeah, Callie points out, yeah, I love the reminder that all those small pieces that can cause fatigue. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really does add up. So yeah. Manav says, never noticed it, think that's better. Fantastic. Yeah. Callie says that be nervous about driving on the right side. It's funny. It's not necessarily as freaky as you think it would be, or at least it wasn't for me. The big thing that I always remember is a tip from a friend of mine from Australia who has come out to the US quite a bit, and so driven on both sides of the road quite a bit. And his reminder is that you always keep oncoming traffic on your side of the car. So if you're driving on the left, then oncoming traffic should be on your left. If you're driving on the right, keep oncoming traffic on your right. And he says that that helps out quite a bit. Todd says that going out to Scotland to play on the old course, that sounds fantastic. I'm not a golfer. I don't need that level of frustration in my life, but I do enjoy watching golf. And going out to play on the old course sounds amazing. Okay, cool. All right, where were we? State. Yeah. All right. Okay, so what we've got is we've got our little UseState. So now we're creating our state object. We've got our recipe, and that's now being displayed out. So what I eventually want to do here is I eventually want to make these items so that they're clickable, so that you can tap each one of these when you're done with, say, that particular step, and have that then update. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get that updated, because what I'm going to need is I'll need to mark a flag for each one of those items when it's completed. And I also need to make sure that I also add in an event handler. So yeah, So Kali says it's tricky when you're driving in fill-in country here and no one follows the rules, because there's a lot of countries that feel like that nobody follows the rules. I don't have it back there. There's a great book called Traffic, which talks about how we drive and why we drive the way that we do. I didn't think I'd be getting into talking about driving this morning. Here we are. But anyway, there's a great book called Traffic that talks about driving and talks about why we drive the way that we drive and so forth. And the author actually spends a lot of time talking about different countries where things feel very chaotic with regards to how they drive. And I've been out to a few countries where things are just like really chaotic. And he highlights that even though, things do look very chaotic, that there's oddly like some bit of just like musical magic that happens there, and that if you're used to that style, that it actually does work. So yeah, I don't know, kind of interesting. Either way though, it's a great book to check out there, called Traffic. So, okay. Anyway, yeah, so let's go ahead and let's first talk a real quick bit about, what do I want to talk about first? What I want to talk about first is I want to talk about an event handler. Yeah, let's do an event handler first, and then we'll do our state. So let's do event handlers first. Because I want to make sure that, when we go to modify our state, that we're doing so for a particular reason. So let's do this. I missed your questions. I apologize, Sashi. Oh, Sashi, I apologize. I totally missed that. I got too stuck into talking about cars. What if UseState didn't have an initial value? I don't know. Yeah, then you could use that. I guess I'd be really. So one of the things here about UseState is it's not necessarily going to tie it to a particular type of object here. Yeah. You stumped me here for a second. I'm going to do this live here. Okay, set state just takes the new state. Let me do this. Let me, okay. And then, let me see. Too many re-renders. Yeah, okay. I think I know what that's yelling at me for. Hold on for a second. This is just going to take me a minute to sort of walk through. Oh, right. Okay. Can't read map of. Oh, right. Trying to think. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Trying to. Oh, how do I do this with HTML? I cannot believe I'm now going to fail on this. Although, actually, I don't think... equals... are you actually working? You're not. How do I do this? Did I mean unclick? I did. Yeah. Yeah. I want... what I'm trying to do. So Sasha asked the question earlier. If you set it to a blank value, then what happens? And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to real quickly set up that scenario here. And so that's sort of what's taking me a minute here is I'm just like trying to set up that scenario here. Let me make sure that this is firing correctly here. Okay, there we go. All right, yeah. All right. Sorry that took me a minute here. Each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Yeah. I'll update that later. Okay. So it is now working. Yeah, just took me a minute there. I apologize. All right, here we go. So, so the question was a couple of minutes ago, do we need to have an initial state? So what happens if we don't set that? And the answer is no. And so we've actually just proven this, that we don't need an initial state. So we set up UseState here, and then we went ahead and we were still able to go in and update that with setRecipe later on. And still update that to whatever object it is that we wanted here. So the TLDR on that is it is possible to not set an initial state object and still have that work just fine. So yeah, so that still works. Curious about something here. That doesn't work. I think there's a way for me to indicate a specific data type, but I'm not 100% certain. Maybe somebody else in chat knows. So on UseState, UseState is going to give me the ability to set the initial value. It's going to give me back that object that I can then use, and it's also going to give me a method that I can then use to update state. I think that there's a way in TypeScript, and I'm not sure if anybody in chat happens to know this, for me to indicate the specific data type that I want my state object to be. I'm pretty sure that that's possible, but I'm not 100% certain. So if somebody happens to know that, that would be greatly appreciated. So the answer to the question, though, that Sashi had asked earlier is, do I need to set an initial state value? The answer to that is no, that you can get away from that. Okay. So Luis says that I've tried before and got the too many renders issue and couldn't find a really clear answer. Okay. So too many re-renders is almost sort of like the 500 hold on. Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah. So Adam says, UseState string is right, which I would have expected, but it's not updating for my set recipe here. That my set recipe will still take an any and not a string, and I should be able to limit that so that it will only take a string there, which is not occurring. So yeah. Okay. To go back to, if I can type, there we go. To go back to Lewis's question about that too many re-renders. So too many re-renders is sort of like the React version of a 500, that it's a very just generic, something went wrong message. That's really what that is. And what I've found in the past, if I'm getting that it's typically one of a couple of different things. One is that I'm not giving it a new object when I try to update state. So you'll notice that one of the first things that I did when I got the original error message is I created a copy of mashed potatoes. That one thing that I find quite frequently, and it's going to work for the moment, but one of the things that I find sometimes is if I'm not giving it a new copy of an object, then it can sometimes give me that error message. The other big place where I notice that I get that error message is if I'm not putting something into like an event handler or into another function, and that it's executing at a moment that React isn't expecting it. And so that was why you'll notice that the second thing that I did when I was trying to do my my troubleshooting here is I created an event handler. So that way, the only time that would run was just when I clicked on that button and did it that way. So you'll notice that was what I wound up doing is I put it inside of an event handler, and that was what got rid of the error message. So if you're getting that too many re-renders, the first thing to check is make sure that you are creating a copy of the object, which you can do by using this syntax right here. And the second thing to check is make sure that if you're calling something like a set object to update state, that you're doing it inside of an event handler, you're doing it inside of a function, you're doing it someplace basically that React would expect you to do it. Okay. Now, Todd says UseState, looking at an old React, looks similar. Don't know why I did it that way. Yeah. Let me see real quick here. Let me UseState TypeScript, and it would be with a generic. let's see. I'm just trying to see if I can find. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, see, it says to use the generic, which is what I would have expected, but it's not behaving that way. Yeah, see, this is what I would have expected, is just to use the generic. So here's what I'm looking for. So one of the big things that you can do with TypeScript is you can define type structure. Like it's the reason to use TypeScript is that ability to define what your data structure is going to look like. And so, for example, if I come down here to my recipe, what you're going to notice is that my recipe is actually giving me back a lot of great information. That you'll notice that it's telling me right here that I should have a title, I should have a description, and I should have steps. And in fact, if I'm going to, rather than using it with an object, if I start typing out things like title, or I start typing out things like steps, what you're going to notice is that it will actually then give me the data type. It will actually tell me what the data type is that it's expecting there. And in turn, it will also do inline validation. So if I give it something that doesn't fit, that doesn't work, it will not compile, that it will give me a compiler error. And this is such a huge thing when you're doing JavaScript, because it allows you to then overcome one of the biggest weaknesses of JavaScript, because in JavaScript everything is weakly typed. Nothing has a static type, and so the challenge that you then wind up running into is then you never know what a particular data type is, and more importantly, your editor doesn't know what a particular data type is, and so it winds up just going, hey, I don't know what anything is, and as a result, as you're typing away, you can then just get a full class of bugs that you wouldn't have been expecting otherwise, all because you were using the wrong data types, or you were expecting one data type and getting a different one, or you just didn't know at all what was coming. And so what you have the ability to do is you have the ability to indicate something like string, or I could go in and set an interface up here, interface recipe. And I could say that I'm going to have a title of string. I'm going to have a description of string, and I'm going to have steps, which would be an array of string, like that. And so now what I get the ability to do is then indicate, hey, this is going to be a recipe. There we go. And if I leave something off, let's say I don't put in a description, you'll notice that I now get red squigglies, because I defined what my data structure is supposed to be up here. And then I said, hey, there's going to be a title, a description, and steps. And I don't have a description now. So it gives me red squigglies. And so if I now put that back in, now those red squigglies go away. I love interfaces. Interfaces are like the reason to use TypeScript, if you ask me, because they give you that ability to define what your data structures are. And because of the fact that JavaScript or ECMAScript doesn't know what an interface is, when this is converted into JavaScript, because TypeScript doesn't run, it's always the JavaScript, that interface goes away. So it's completely weightless. It helps me as the developer and has zero impact on the performance of my application. It doesn't get any better than that. It's wonderful. So it's great to have that ability. And so then what you can do is you then have the ability to start using generics here. And in theory, then what should happen is on set recipe, and let me highlight what I'm looking at here, what it is that I'm looking for here, is remember what set recipe is gonna do here. This is gonna allow me to change the recipe. Well, if I'm gonna change the recipe, what am I looking for? I'm looking for wait for it, a recipe. And so what should happen right here is this, rather than saying any, this should say recipe. So that's the behavior that I'm expecting here, is I should be able to restrict that so that it's recipe. And then what also becomes that much better is that now when I come down here and I say set recipe, what this should now do is this should now go, hey, you need to give me a recipe here. And it's not doing that. So yeah, so it's that's what I'm looking for here, because this again is the full reason to use Typescript. So yeah. Adam says maybe it's a tsconfig issue or the TS version. It shouldn't be the TS version because I'm using the most recent version. It might be a tsconfig issue. And so I'll go play around with that in a second here. I don't know if I'll do it on stream or not, but I might just kind of real quick create a tsconfig here. Let's see. I don't think that that's what I want. Nope. Okay, how about okay. Yeah, the tsconfig is what you can use to there we go. Is what you can use to indicate how you want things to be compiled. It might be something inside my tsconfig. Again, I don't want to go into that on stream because that's going to take me a little while to go in and start to dig into, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm not going to worry about it there. But you're probably right, Adam, that it's probably something inside my tsconfig there. So yeah. Okay. Callie says, love the red squigglies. Such a great way to be like, oh, this is wrong. Agreed. And that really is like, that's TypeScript in a nutshell. That I was talking to one of the TypeScript product managers a little bit ago, and he jokes that his job is to create red squigglies, to find new ways to let developers know, hey, there's something wrong here. And it's so important to be able to find that out, is big. Yeah. Jose likes target is ES5. Okay. Let's give that a shot. Let's see. Boop-a-doo. Come back over here. It still doesn't like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Try reopening it. Yeah, I'm gonna make myself a note here. Figure out why the generic isn't working. It should. It should. But I'm not sure why it's not. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Jose asked the question, is there full stack roles in Microsoft are normally dedicated to front or back? That really depends on the team. And I know that there's an irony there because typically when you think large corporation, that you're going to be thinking that everybody's going to be very specialized. But in a lot of ways, it feels like we're a bunch of smaller companies all inside of one larger company. And a lot of times those smaller companies can almost have a feel of a startup, which I love. And so it really is going to depend on your team and on what you're working on. And so in my case, I'm full stack, that I do both the front end and the back end. So it really, it really does depend on the org that you're in. Okay. All right. Let's see. I want... Okay. Cool. All right. Let's see. Let's try and get everything back. I need a real quick break here. So let's do this. What I want to do is I really do want to try and get into our event handler here. So I am going to do that. I am going to take a real quick, just 2-minute break here. So let me just do this. Yada yada. Font. There we go. Okay. So yeah, so I'm going to be back in 2 minutes, and then we'll get in, we'll take a look at our event handler, and then we'll finally get in and start updating our state here. So yeah, so just give me 2 minutes here. Okay. Cool. Let me I can go ahead and get rid of that. Hello to Julian. Okay, cool. Mohammed, yeah, you got it figured out. Yeah. How to install all the React modules? Just npm install. If I can type, and then npm start to start that back up. So, yeah. You had to do npm install React DOM first. That shouldn't be the case. Huh. That's weird. You shouldn't have had to have done that. React DOM is listed. That's weird. Huh. Anyway. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. I want this. I was hoping to find it here. Okay, I don't think it's listed here. All right, that's fine. Let me do it this way. So here's what I want to have happen. This is what we're trying to build out here. What we're trying to build out is I want it so that as I click on each one of these items, if I click on cut potatoes, boil potatoes, mashed potatoes, if I click on each one of those, I want it to line through it on each one of them. And so the way that I'm going to eventually do that is by updating state. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to set up an event handler here. I need to set it so that you can click on the item and then have something happen in response. Now, normally the way that we would do this, if this was just core HTML here, normally the way that we would do this is we would just go in and add in an on-click event handler and just set it so that when you click on the item, we'll then go ahead and respond to that. And we could absolutely do that. That if I go into my recipe here on my LI, I could go in and say, let's do this. Let's put it up here. Function on click, boo, boom, alert, item clicked. And then I can come down here and I can say on click equals boom on click. Okay. By the way, sound effects help when you're writing code. Sound effects are very important. You have to use sound effects. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. Okay. So as I click on each one of these items here, if I come back over here, now what we should notice is sure enough, I get my little alert here saying item clicked. So boom, boom, and boom. Exactly the way that we would expect it here. Now I can also sort of just like keep building on this. If I, rather than doing this little alert here, let's do this instead, is let's go ahead and update our map here. There we go. Gotta add the boops, the beeps. Absolutely. I'm with you, Callie. See? Yeah, all of those things help. All of those things help. Okay. So the other thing that I'm doing here real quick in this next little update is this. So if you're not familiar with map in JavaScript, what map will do is it will automatically loop through all of your items and convert them into something else. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my list of steps, which right now is just an array of strings, and I'm converting this into something else. That in my case, I'm converting this into a list of LIs. Now, one of the things that React, and honestly, I think any of the front-end frameworks want, is they want each item that's going to be displayed in a list to have a key. And you could potentially read the key from the item itself. That would work just fine. In my case, though, my items don't have keys. And so I'm going to generate that on the fly by using index. So index will start at 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And then I can just add that in as the key. And this is typically the way that you would convert a list of items into, say, an unordered list or something like that, is set up map, whatever your individual item is, set up the index, and then now that's going to be added in as the key here. Now, what you're also going to notice with our onClick is that I can gain access to this, which is the current object. This is pretty stock standard web programming here. So if I do this, oh, that's funny. You're going to notice, that's okay though, is the undefined. So it's not giving me the appropriate this. And that's actually fine. I can work around that. Because what I can do is I can go on click and then pass in my index, and let me collapse that away so we can see all of this right here. There we go. Okay. There we go. So what you're going to notice here is my onClick. You'll notice that it now takes in one parameter of type number. So we're just calling that index. You'll notice that I can now pass that in. And then now what we're going to see here is we'll be able to access that index. So I'll be able to know which one it is that you clicked on. Okay, so let me go ahead and save that. Let me come back over here to my page. And now, dang it. So I told you when I first started this morning that technology had been giving me a challenge here. And what's funny is I knew that that was wrong the moment I typed it out. All right, here's what's happening. What's happening is you'll notice when I run my page right now that it's printing out 0, 1, 2. It's not really what I wanted. And the reason that it's printing out 0, 1, 2 is because it's calling this little onClick each time. That's not the behavior that I actually want here. Let me, oh, how do I handle this? I want this. You're going to yell at me if I do it that way, so that's not right. I want... Oh, I know what I want. Aha, okay. And I actually think I can do it this way. All right, Yeah, that's what I want. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay. So here's what I want you to notice. What I want you to notice is this is now working. You're going to notice that if I click on boiled potatoes, second item, index starts with 0, this is now going to display 1. You're going to notice that when I click on mashed potatoes, this is now going to display 2. When I click cut potatoes, this is now going to display 0. All of this is now working. Yep. Now, yeah, Drew highlights the right answer there. Yeah, it took me a minute to remember that syntax. So here's what's happening here. Here's what I did wrong. What I did wrong is, and this is something that obviously I still do constantly, is this. And it's something that I always forget. Let me back this up and let's sort of all review this together. All right. When you run that syntax that you see right there, when you say function name, in my case on click, and then you put parentheses around it, what that's going to tell literally any programming language, including TypeScript, JavaScript, including Python, C#, whatever it is, what you're saying the moment you put in those parentheses is you're saying to run this right now. Capital letters, exclamation marks, the whole thing. Saying run this right now. That's what you're telling it to do. And so that's why if I save this here, that what it's going to do is it's then going to display out that 0, 1, 2 right here. So when I run my page, you'll notice 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. And again, it's because what I'm doing here is I'm saying run this right now. But that's not really what I'm looking for here. What I'm really looking for here is for it to run when it's actually clicked. So what I can do instead is this. Is I can create a lambda, or I can create an anonymous function. And so what you're going to notice is that this syntax here, this is now going to create a function here. And that function is now not going to be called until I actually click on the item. So that's why we need that extra little bit of syntax here. Is because what I'm looking to do is to make sure that it doesn't execute until we actually click on it. So that's what's happening there. Okay, I'm going to pause here for just a moment. There's like a 2 or 3 minute delay between whatever it is that I'm saying and it actually getting out there. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment, partly to get a real quick sip of coffee and a sip of water, but also so that way if you have questions on that, now's a perfect time to ask, because I know that that's a little bit complex. So I want to make sure everybody groks what's going on there and why we need that extra little bit of syntax. Because it's something that it's very easy to forget. Obviously, it's something I forgot for a second there, and it's something that's very important. Okay, Drew says, "Oh yeah, time to go down that closure rabbit hole." Yep. That's where we wound up. That's where we wound up. Okay. So now this is behaving the way that we expect it to. Okay. So what I want you to notice is we are now adding in an event handler so that when you click on a list item, it's then going to execute code. And we're doing all of this inside of our one TSX file. And to a certain extent, this is going to be very similar to how you would build a normal event handler. Now what I want to do is I want to up-level this one step. Now what I want to do is I want to set this up so that I can pass in an event handler from my app. So basically what I'm looking to do here is when you click on an item to do something to it, I want to centralize that out here. Okay. And so I'll get to that in a second. But Jose asked the question, I know how to use it, but you don't understand why when you don't have params, you need to do onClick equals. Oh, okay. That's a great question. So the question is, if you're not passing in params, why do you need to do that? So what we're working in is we're working in TSX technically, or JSX really at a higher level here. And so what TSX or JSX are is it's a combination of both HTML, technically XML, but HTML for our purposes, and either JavaScript or TypeScript, so some programming language. So it's a combination of those two. And so because of the fact that we're combining these, what we need is some mechanism to say, hey, I'm doing HTML, or some mechanism to say, hey, I'm doing code. And more importantly, what we need is some way to switch from one to the next to the next. And so we can see that in action right down here. So this return statement here is generating the eventual HTML that's going to be displayed out. And so what you're going to notice is that we've got our title right here, we've got our description right here, and we've got our step display. Now our step display is being defined just up above us, and then the title and description are somewhere right about here. I'll scroll up in just a second here to highlight all of those. Now, all of these, title, description, step display, all of those are variables. All of those are part of TypeScript. But the catch is, when I'm inside this return, the moment I say open my section tag, I'm now in HTML mode. And so when I'm in HTML mode, what this is expecting is this is expecting HTML. So if I go in and I just do title, for example, if I save this, what you're going to notice is that it now just gives me title. And the reason is that my my title is going to be just a string literal. So now what I can do by putting in the curly braces is I can say, hey, go read the variable value. and put that in, and that's now what's going to happen. And so if I bring that back up to my onClick, then that's exactly what's happening. It's that same thing, is now I'm just doing it that way. So then you ask, so for on a form, if you want to do a submit, do you need to say on submit and then E? Yeah, so one of the things that always gets tricky in JavaScript, TypeScript, is the keyword this. Because what this means will change depending on where you are, depending on how the function was called, depending on how the function was declared, depending on where the function was declared. It gets really confusing really fast. And so one of the things that you want to try and avoid whenever possible is to use the keyword this. So if we can get away from that, or get away from this, it's always going to help us. And so what I'm doing down below to avoid using this, because again, it's not being set up correctly as we demonstrated earlier, is I'm passing in my index directly. Now, David highlights this fact, is on an event handler, you will always have some form of event args, something that's going to let you know about what the event was. Now, in my case, I'm not going to use those. The only thing that I need is just the index, so I can just use the index and I'm done. But if you are going to use the event args, which is typically just done by using the letter E in JavaScript or TypeScript, then you could still go ahead and do that. So I could actually now just go in and say E right here, and then up here, I don't remember the exact data type, and I really don't care. But now, if I do this, let me go ahead and hit save. Let's come back over here, bloop. And then now what you're going to notice is that there is the full event args for that item. So if that's the way that you want to program, if the way that you prefer to program is just to use the event args and go at it that way, you can absolutely do that. That will work 100%. You can absolutely do that. It was just, in my case, that wasn't what I needed. All that I needed is just the index, which I already had access to. And so that's why I just did it that way. So yeah, so either way would work. And that was the way that, that I did it. Okay. Cool. Great question. Thank you, David. All right. Let's see. Yeah. Let's go ahead and let's keep on keeping on here. All right. Okay. So we're using an interface, and I've made clear my adoration for TypeScript interfaces because they allow me to define my data structure. And so what you're going to notice here is I originally had title, description, and steps. And so this was a string, and in this case, it's an array of strings. Now, what you're also going to notice is that I'm not limited to just doing things like strings and arrays and object types. Because when we think about interfaces in programming, it's not just about our strings and data types and things like that. that we also have the ability to have methods, to have functions. And so that's what I'm going to add in right here is a function. So here's the way that I declare this, that I specify the name, in my case, step click. I can specify any parameters that I want that function to have. So it's going to have one. The name actually doesn't matter. The name could be whatever. It's the data types that are important. So it's going to have one that's going to be called number. And then out here, that's going to be the return type. So void meaning that it's not going to return back a value. So that's how I can then go in and define that. And so I can then add in my step click here. And then I could come down here and I can now use step click. Because after all, these are now just being passed in as parameters. And so just like I could use my title from before, I don't need that if statement anymore. I'll go ahead and get rid of that. But just like I can use title and description and my steps and so forth, I can go ahead and use step click. And so now what I could do is this. Let me go ahead and get rid of this function now since I don't need it. Is I can come back out here to my app TSX and I could define a function here. Step click, or better yet, toggle step completion, which is really what I want this to do. Take in my index and make that a number. And then let's go ahead and, for right now, I'm just going to say console log step index from app TSX. Just because what I want to do is I want to prove that I'm executing this from my TSX. So now I can take my toggle step completion and then down here where I set up my recipe, I can now pass in that can I do this? Apparently not. All right, fine. I'll do it this way. Oh, I know why. Hold, please. There we go. Nope. Now what are you yelling at me for? Oh, that's funny. Okay. That's... Oh, it's going to be a neat way to display this. You know what I'm going to do? I don't want to do it this way. Man, I want... I'm just trying to figure out a neat way to do it. All right. Let me talk about what's happening, and then I'll talk about and then we'll figure out how to make this a little bit neater. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about what's happening. Okay. All right. So what I've got here is I've got my recipe tag. And so what I want to do is I want to pass parameters into this recipe. And originally what we were doing is we were just simply passing in our recipe as props. And so I just used the spread operator, recipe, Bob's your uncle. We were done. Cool. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to now add in, actually, hold on. I can do it this way. Never mind. I'm not going to do it the ugly way. I can do it this way. I can go step click equals, I can do it this way. There we go. I'm not even going to talk about all the ugliness. Let's just do it this way. I'm just going to say step click equals toggle step completion. There we go. I'm just going to do it that way. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. That's a neater way to do it. Let's just do it this way. There's no reason to get into object construction, deconstruction, and all of that. This is going to be a neater way to do it. Okay. So this is going to take care of my recipe part. And then this, I love it when a plan comes together, is going to take care of my step click. Cool. There we go. Such a neater way to do it. So this is going to be passed in as a parameter. And so now what's going to happen is when somebody clicks on one of our items, it's then going to call step click, which is going to be wired up to there, which is going to be wired up, in our case, to our app.tsx. That's how it's all going to happen. And so now, yoink. Let's go ahead and let's make sure all my files are saved. They are. Let's go ahead and click on an item. And now what you're going to notice is exactly what we expected. Is now it's going to say right here, step 0 from app.tsx. And so now I've got my event handler all wired up. Everything is looking really good. So boom, 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 boom. Looking good. All right. Love it when that comes together. So now I've got my event handler. Let's go ahead and let's start checking some boxes here. So now I've got that. Cool. All right. And I think I'm not going to put a check next to debug because we still might have to do more of that. All right. So there's that. So now the next thing then that I want to do is now I want to start toggling those items. So I want to set it so that if we click on an item, that we're going to mark that as completed, and then we'll do a strike through on it. And otherwise, we'll go ahead and leave it as is. So let me do this. Let me go to my steps first of all, and let's do this. Let's create a and then okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a definition, a TypeScript definition file here. Thank you, David. Thanks for coming in. Jim asked the question: would have done the deconstruction and done it that way? Would that have worked? It would have, but it gets uglier. And that was a big part of the reason why I shifted away from that, is because it requires a couple of additional steps to get down to that, and I didn't want to confuse matters by digging into that. So hit me up on Twitter, and I can talk a little bit about what was happening there. It should have worked, but sadly it didn't. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter, and I can talk about why. All right. So I guess in the end, it shouldn't have worked because it did what it was supposed to do. All right. Jose asked the question, what does the .d.ts convention mean? So in Typescript, stop me if you've heard this before, we have an awful lot with interfaces. Interfaces are the heartbeat of TypeScript. And one of the big things then that you can do with TypeScript is you can set up a definitions file. And in a definitions file, what you have is just a collection of interfaces and potentially types. And all of this is going to then describe the structure of all of my data. So by my saying d.ts, what I'm doing here is I'm saying the only thing that's going to be contained inside of here is just going to be interfaces and nothing else. All we're going to have is interfaces. But also by using this convention, this file now actually gets to be used more broadly than a normal TS file. And that can really be helpful when you're creating inside of the same project, both the front end and the back end, for example. And I maybe need to share an interface between both sides. And so you can do that with the d.ts file. And yeah, and then just have your list of interfaces inside of there. So that's what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a file that's now just going to store my my interfaces. Okay. You know what else I can do? Export interface recipe, and I could actually kind of really make things a little bit fancier here. I think I can get away with that. Yeah, that works. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. There we go. This is looking better. Yeah, I'm really liking the way this is now coming together. Yeah, so what you're going to notice is that I've got my step here. So this is going to have the text that we're going to display, my Boolean, whether or not something is completed. You're going to notice that now I've got my recipe here, and that's going to have my, my title, my description, and my array of steps. And then now you're also going to notice my recipe props, and that's then going to have that little function. And so remember that recipe props here, this is being used by our recipe component to properly be displayed out. So that's everything that that I've got there, which actually dawns on me. I'm going to have a name. A naming conflict here. What should I call this? I'm going to say recipe info. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, cool. Jose says, yeah, change your types TS to types D.TS. Yeah, yeah, that's the way to go. Okay, so now let's see. Let's import recipe props from And then let's make sure, okay, cool. All of that's now wired up correctly. All right. Yeah, so now there is my recipe props. All of that is looking good. And then on my step display, I need to make sure that this is now going to display the text. All right, I'm gonna make sure that my page is displaying correctly here. Oh, it's not yet because I have another issue here. Okay, that's right. Okay, so now let me clean this up. Let me go ahead and say import, and let's say recipe info and recipe props from my props. Actually, yeah, I think I can get away with just doing that. And let's go ahead and recipe info. There we go. And then now I'm going to do one last little thing here. Let's make this optional. Okay. I'm going to get all the code out, and then I'm going to go back and talk about it here in just a second. There we go. Okay, that's looking good. All right. Okay, so here's the couple little updates that I made here. So completed, I've marked as optional. And that way I don't have to set a default value on it. The default will then wind up just being null or unknown, which is going to effectively be the same as Boolean. If somebody really wants to get pedantic here and argue, hey, you should really be going in and setting that to false rather than just making that optional, that's fine. I'm okay with just leaving that as optional and just going at it that way. So yeah, so that was the real quick update that I made there. Then what I did is I went back to my app TSX. I imported in that cool new recipe info here, and I updated it. So now I've got the title, I've got the description, and I've got the steps. And then now what you're going to notice is that I've got the text for each one of these to now be cut potatoes, boiled potatoes, and mashed potatoes. So there are all of my steps. Okay. And so now what I want to do is on my toggle step completion is I want to update this. So now we're going to toggle the item. And I'm going to, I'm going to put this now inside of my app function here. So let me move this down here, and let's go ahead and do a little bit of work. So I'm going to say const temp recipe equals boom, 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 my recipe. I'm going to say temp recipe steps index dot completed equals the reverse of my temp recipe steps index completed, and then that's not going to work. I am going to need to set these to false. Fine. Completed false. Fine, I'll do it that way. Cool. There we go. And then now I can go ahead and say set recipe. Boom, boom, boom. Or no, I don't even need to do it that way. I can now just say temp recipe. I should be good. Yeah, I don't think I need to reclone it. Okay, cool. And for right now, I'm just going to leave it that way. Okay, so here's what I've got. Is I'm creating a new copy of the recipe. Remember that the big rule that I have here with state in React is I always need to work on a copy of the object. And so the first thing that I'm doing here is I'm creating a copy of the object. So that's step one. Step two is then to do whatever modification it is that you want. And so in my case, I'm just toggling my completed option. So I'm just converting that from true to false or false to true, whichever it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and replace the recipe with that temp recipe. Now that I've made my change, go ahead and make the update. And then I'm still going ahead and console logging this out just to prove that. But that's now what I've got going on. So there is now the appropriate code to modify my the completed status. Now, I mentioned earlier that what I want is I'm just going to create a public CSS just to make my life a little easier. Index.css. And I'm going to create a brand new class. Strike through is, I think it's under text decoration. These are one of those I can like never remember line through. There we go. Yeah, like of all the different things in CSS, like where like things like line through and underline are and so forth, those are ones that like always get me and I can never remember where they are. So I'm going to just create this inside of a global CSS file. It is possible to do your CSS on an individual component by component basis if you so desire. But in my case, I'm just going to pull it in globally. So I'm just going to say href equals index.css. There we go. And just leave it like that. So now I want over here this. Where is my recipe? Okay. So let's break this down into a couple of lines here. There we go. Yeah, my formatting is going to become a little bit trickier here because I'm just going to be doing a lot. Okay. So what I want is when an item is completed, I want to see a line through it. And so the way that I can do that is by saying class name equals, and then I can write a little bit of code right here. So I can say that I'm going to look at the step completed. If it is completed, then I'm going to set the class name to be line through. And if it's not completed, then I'm just going to set that to an empty string. So I'm just setting the class dynamically on the fly. Now you are going to notice that I'm using class name here. And the reason that I'm using class name is because class is a reserved word in TypeScript JavaScript. So to avoid any potential name clash confusion, use class name instead, and that will then set the name of the class. So if it's completed, we'll see a line through. If it's not completed, then it's just going to appear as normal, and that should now all be dynamic. Because what's going to happen is you're going to click on an item. That's going to call out to our little step click. That's defined inside of app.tsx. It's pointing to our toggle step completion. Our toggle step completion is then going to clone the recipe. It's going to find the particular step that you clicked on. It's going to toggle the completed status. We're then going to reset that back in, and then we're done. Should it be strike through? Didn't I? Nope, I left it as line through. Yeah, I updated that. So yeah, so boom, boom, boom to then set it. I'm going to leave the console log here just as a little bit of debugging, but what should now happen here is I click on my cut potatoes, I get my line through it, I click on it again, and it now goes away. Just like that. Cool. And so there are, took a little while to get there, but there are our event handlers, and there is the state as well. Cool. All right. Nice. We're looking good. I've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to focus in on deploy. We'll add an API next week here. But now, I've got everything all set up. Pretty slick. Pretty slick. All right. I'll go ahead and get rid of my console log. I'll go ahead and save this. And we're looking good. We're looking good. Okay. So let me deploy out all of my changes. As I highlighted below, magic. But anyway, as I've highlighted below, what I'm doing is I'm using Azure Static Web Apps, which is probably my favorite thing that we've released since Visual Studio Code. And what this does is it actually integrates with GitHub, and in particular, it integrates with GitHub Actions to automatically deploy out any so-called static web applications. Now, a static web app is a bit of a misnomer because it can still have a server-side interface and things like that. But this will now integrate with GitHub. So what I can do is I can open up a new terminal window. I can go git checkout b add state git add dot git commit m added state, and then I can say git push u origin and then my add state to now push this up into GitHub. And so would have posted the GIF if you could. Yep, absolutely. And so now, if I come back over here to my little recipe manager, go to my actions, you're going to notice nothing is happening. That's okay. That was actually expected. But what I can do is I can now do a compare and create a pull request. Added state. Let me go ahead and say create pull request. And now what this is going to do, this is so cool. What this is going to do is this is now going to start deploying out my, my project here. And it's doing that through GitHub Actions. Now, I want you to notice what I did here. What I did is I created a branch. I committed everything to that new branch. I pushed that branch, and then I made a PR. Now, I didn't do that just to be a good developer. I didn't do that just because Drew, who's a friend of mine and former teammate of mine, is watching, and I don't want him to think that I use bad Git practices, because I absolutely do use good Git practices. So it wasn't just because of that, but I want to be able to highlight this really cool feature in static web apps. So whenever you're deploying to wherever it is, you always want to make sure that things work properly before you push it all out to production. I know. It's an old-fashioned habit that I have, but it's a good practice, right? That's what we should be doing. What Azure Static Web Apps will do for me is every time that you make a PR into the main or production branch, whatever branch it is that is being deployed out for the world to see, is it will automatically create a staging environment for you. And so that's what it did right here, is it created a brand new staging environment. So if I go back to my Azure portal here, where is, I might need to zoom out. Yeah, I just need to zoom out a little bit. Right here, if I open up environments, now what you're going to notice is that there is that little added state environment that we just created. And so if I click on browse, that'll then open up in a new tab. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to get rid of some of my excess tabs here. There we go. So now there is that, and you'll notice I'm getting my interaction right here on production. And the big thing that you're going to notice here is this -4. That's indicating the staging environment number. Contrast that with production. There's my main branch. So if I open up my main branch, none of that is happening. So it's all because of the fact that I did that neat little deploy. All right, so how do I make that live? Well, right now, the only way to make that live is to actually merge the PR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my added state here. And then I'm going to scroll down. Let's merge my PR, confirm my merge. And now we'll go ahead and rerun the action and do the deployment here. So if I go back to my actions, now it's going to deploy this out. Now, for anybody who's familiar with app services, one of the things that you can do with app services that as of right now, this does not support is a hot swap, where what you can do is I have my staging environment here, I have my production environment here, and what I can do is literally just boop, and then just swap those over. Again, sound effects matter there. And what's great about being able to do that is then you can do that with zero downtime. Azure Static Web Apps doesn't give that to me yet. It might in the future, but it's worth highlighting the target audience here and who should be using Azure Static Web Apps. So this is not for that huge scale environment where if I have 2 minutes of downtime, that's going to cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. That's not what this is geared towards. This is geared towards those smaller sites that you're going to be working on, where if you have a couple of minutes of downtime because you're pushing out a new version, as long as maybe you just manage that so it's in the middle of the night or something like that, that's okay. So that's what this is geared towards. And what I also want to mention, as this is just finishing out its deployment, which it just did, is I also actually get a global CDN as well. So this is my production site here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to zoom in on it, unfortunately. But what I want you to notice on the production site here is There is no region mention here. So this doesn't say West US. And the reason for that is because I'm actually getting geo distribution automatically here. So don't think that just because you're not getting a relatively high-end feature like a hot swap, that this isn't geared for applications that you might have thousands of users using, global users using, because it can absolutely do that. And as we'll see next week when we go into add an API, is we can use Azure Functions, which will give you auto scaling, which is wonderful. So we do get all of those really cool things, but there are a couple of just like a little bit more enterprise level things that you're not necessarily going to get with this. And that's okay. That's all right. All right. So now let me go ahead and hit refresh. I think I've stalled long enough. And now I'll go ahead and click on each of those items. And now that's all working. And now we've got state up and running inside of React. Cool. And again, if you want the repository to go check out my my code, there it is. And again, I always like to highlight the fact that as I've demonstrated, I'm not necessarily a React expert. That the goal is always, hey, let's get in, let's play around, and let's poke, and let's have some fun. And let's also learn together. And what I also really like about doing this style of presentation is it also can serve as a nice reminder of those different types of things that we can forget, which we saw when we tried to set up the event handler. And having to deal with closures and all of those little things that we can sometimes forget. So I also like being able to do that. And I also really like being able to do a little bit of live debugging, because after all, this is what we as developers do. So that's Code and Coffee. Next week, we'll go in, we will add on an API and keep building out our little project, make it a little bit more robust. What I do intend to do in the future is to make this into a fully fledged single page app. I also do intend to bring in a bit of better interface here as well by using Tailwind. So definitely check all of that out. And I don't know if Mallory's still out there or not, but you probably have easy access to this. Mallory is a link to Web Wednesday for next week. So I also host a show called Web Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 11 o'clock UTC. I think I'm doing my math correctly there. 11 p.m. UTC. I'm pretty sure that that's right. And what I do on Web Wednesday is I bring in somebody that's much smarter than me, which is a relatively low bar, and talk to them about web dev related things. And so on this upcoming Wednesday, so the 17th, I'm going to have on Aaron Powell, who knows a ton about React. So if you have React questions, definitely come show up on Wednesday, and we'll have Aaron on. Aaron will be more than happy to answer all of your questions, and we can talk more about React then. So if you've got more questions, definitely check that out. You can always find me on Twitter. You can see that, right about there, my @GeekTrainer. And yeah, so thanks for tuning in. I will see all of you Wednesday if you tune in for that, or if not, I will see you on Thursday, or I guess Friday as well if you're like in Australia or something and it's the future over there. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. It was great chatting with everybody, and I will see you all next week. Glad to see that that was your first time and you got to learn how to run the app. That's fantastic, Manav. Yeah, wonderful, beautiful. All right, thank you. Bye.